Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Empowerment Project podcast. I am Andrea Bosco,
And I'm Dr. Shar.
and we have the lovely Christina Forlingieri today with us again. Thank you for being here.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be back.
Yeah. So today we are doing a part 2 of last week's episode. So last week's episode was all about, do grades matter with our children? Is there a way we can bring more of the social and emotional learning components into the school system with less pressure on grades? And kind of what does that do to our children? How does that look in the school system? And even the discussion went into how parents deal with the pressures of what success means in to their children. And so if you haven't listened to the last week's episode, probably a good idea to go back and listen to that and then come back to this one. But Christina, I know you had a chance to listen, and you felt compelled to be here with us today. And not only you wanting to be here, but we wanted you to be here from seeing it from both perspectives, being in the education system for so long, as well as raising 3 children of your own, and kind of, how this discussion plays out. Because, when I'll just briefly, the reason why this topic came up was, I shared this reel on my Instagram, my private Instagram page, and I got a lot of responses from teachers, from parents, and it was all about how this particular guy doesn't care about grades. And, he just wants his kids to be good people, and it doesn't matter about grades. So, I got a lot of replies from people, like, very educated. Like, it wasn't like they were shooting their mouth off, but I guess it's not as easily said than done, right? And so I think, like, and even when I shared it and when I was thinking about it, I was like, oh yeah, like, why should we care about grades? Like, why should it be such a big deal? And because I see the pressures that not only my daughter puts on herself, but even like when we're doing our work in high schools, especially, we see the pressures that these students are under to get these good grades, and how they really identify with the marks on paper. And, I just think, like, why does it have to be that way? Like, why can't they still feel successful even though they're not getting 90s, even if they're getting 70s? Or 60s. I'm not talking about like failing the classes and just completely like not giving a crap. I'm talking about those that are really trying, but they're still just not in the 90s, right? But they see all these, the friends and all that. So yeah, like I guess it's easier said than done to be like, let's not care about grades. So I wanted to just jump in on this discussion, and maybe, Christina, what stood out for you in last week's episode, and anything you wanted to contribute from either perspective, from like parent perspective or educator perspective.
I think a lot of it comes from our expectations on ourselves when we were younger. Like, that stood out for me, because when I think about my own children, I've come a long way, but in the beginning, I was kind of obsessed with grades.
Mm-hmm.
And now when I reflect on it, I think it was because in my brain, that was like a marker for success, because that was how we were raised. And how I was raised, like, was you study, you do good, you get good grades, and, that means you're successful. So I think it was more of a conditioned belief for me.
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning, I was so obsessed with my kids reaching these markers, and, learning to read and learning these skills and implementing them at home. And part of that comes down to me, the pressures I'm putting on myself as an educator,
Mm-hmm.
that, this is like my classroom, and I have to, my kids have to learn these things because I'm an educator.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it comes down to our own belief system, our own expectations of ourselves. Now, reflecting back and looking at myself now, I think a lot differently. I have to I have to recenter sometimes, because, you can fall into those traps of like what you're used to. But now I'm really not focusing so much on the grades because I really believe that it's not that it's not important. And I like what you said, Andrea, about we're not saying we want them to fail or, that grades that they shouldn't put in effort. But that's my biggest thing is, are they putting an effort and are they reaching their potential? And I have this conversation a lot with my teen because like he's so smart and, his grades are fine. I know they can be a lot better, but I've had to really let go because I want him to do it for himself. I don't want him to do it because he's trying to please me. I want him to do it for himself because that's real life. What am I going to be doing like behind him every single step of the way until university? Like at some point, we have to let go, let our personal beliefs go, our traumas and our beliefs, and we have to just encourage them, peek in every so often, but let them figure it out on what they want for themselves. I
Yeah.
think that's like the most important.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, do they want it for themselves? And I think it's tough, especially, in the younger ages, because it's sort of like, who cares? The whole idea of like learning is not as important to them. Like, it's sort of like, why do I need to know this stuff? I do find as they get older, they have a more interest in learning certain topics, stuff that they're interested in, of course.
But I also look at that, right? Like,
Yeah.
where are they excelling?
Yeah.
When they come home and they're passionate, we did this building project and they're like showing leadership. They're the group leader. They're bringing in the materials. They're creating a plan and they're so into it. Like that's important because it's their interest, their way of thinking and their strengths. But if they're not doing as well in the pen to paper rote learning, then it comes down to like their strengths as well. Like they don't have to get perfect on every math test, every science test. I think it comes down to really looking at what their interests are and really, what's the word? Feeding that, whether you can feed that at home and like, even just paying attention to what they're excelling at and what they're interested in. It really kind of puts things into perspective for you as a parent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
So when
agree.
did
Yeah.
that change for you, Christina? Like, was there an incident, was there an experience that flipped the switch for you?
Honestly, when I did work on myself,
Oh my God, yeah.
and that's what it always comes down to. When I
Yeah.
did work on myself and I really saw the effect of like those strong expectations, even the ones I was putting on myself, like I'm not even talking about parents, like even the ones my whole life that I was putting on myself and the pressures that I was putting on myself, it's like breaking those cycles. So when you learn those things about yourself, then I really have that in my brain all the time. And when I'm thinking about like how I'm approaching, like if my child fails the test or something, or doesn't do as well as I thought, it's like looking at it from like a full perspective. Like, are they stressed? Did they try their best? Do they think they're not good enough? They didn't try at all. Like where does it come from? Like I look at it from a different lens as opposed to like they didn't try and, being so hard on them.
Yeah.
And that always comes from us, I think, at the end of the day.
And I think that like I mentioned this briefly in the last presentation or the last podcast, is like our job isn't to make our kids happy. Our job is to make them resilient. So when they are failing or when they are falling, we're not there to scoop them up, we're there to ask the right questions to find out why it's happened. And then like, so one of the things that I talk about is asking questions, right? We understand that asking questions is so important. And if you start asking your children why, like intuitively, they already know why. Like, I don't like the subject, or I'm having a hard time with the teacher, or Something's happening at school. So they already know the why. We just have to ask the right questions for them to tap into their own space,
Mhm.
and give them a space where they feel safe enough to talk about why they didn't excel or do, you know, well on the test or whatever it is. Like, we have to start asking good questions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, the cultural stipulations, like, and I can understand what you're saying, Christina, about how you were measured with respect to grades, because, and I'm sure it was the same with you, Andrea, but I know for me in my home, if that was the only way I was even noticed.
Mhm.
Like, if I did
Yeah.
well at school, that's how I was noticed.
Yeah,
I
same.
remember my mom like, coming home and telling me that her best friend showed her daughter's report card because she did so well. And then I got in trouble because my report card didn't look like hers. Like, so for me, I was penalized and punished when my grades were not like above 90.
Yeah. I remember bringing home a test. I got 97% on the test. My dad said, "What happened to the other 3%?"
That's a common phrase in our culture, Andrea. Like, you could have got 100%, and it would
Why
have been
didn't you
like,
get the
well, what
bonus
happened?
question?
That's right. Why didn't you get the bonus question? So I think we're all on the same page here.
I know.
I
Yeah.
think it comes down to, as parents, and again, we have come a long way. We have more information now. We have more resources in schools and out of schools where we can really understand what kind of learner our kids are.
Yeah.
And we can foster that because, like we've mentioned in the in our own personal conversations, like, the school system is unfortunately a little bit of a one size fits all. It's let's, put out the information. I'm not generalizing all teachers because there are teachers that, teach to the class in front of them, which is, what you're supposed to do. But there's some teachers, unfortunately, it's more of a rote thing where you're teaching the same lessons in the same way every single year. And it's very important that people look at who is in front of me. And just like we do for our own kids, but educators also have to do that. Like when I was
Mhm.
teaching kindergarten for so many years, September and even some of October was no curriculum. It
Mm.
was building relationships and getting to know the students. And I know there's less demands on a kindergarten, like with regards to grades and expectations, but just that premise is so important
I
because
think that should happen in every classroom.
does it matter? Like, yes, we are teaching the kids, you fly in letters and sounds and stuff. They will learn that. But how are we going to know how to teach them that if we don't know how they learn and what they like? You
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
know, if they all love, there was one year that they all loved a certain character, like on TV, and we would bring it in to, like, magnets and like little things, but to get their attention. Oh, like they're more hands on. And there's some kids that are more, you speak, they understand, they apply it. It's every year is going to be different. So I
Yeah.
think the biggest thing is to understand, as parents, as educators, that every student, every class has individual learners. And
Mhm.
we have to foster that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to share something that one of the parents who responded to my Instagram post said. So she has two children with exceptional needs. And she said, as a parent of children with needs that go beyond what they will learn in school, I can tell you firsthand their grades are what I am least concerned with. But the hardest thing to watch are parents of other children not celebrate the small things or not see how lucky they are to have children that can actually have academic goals. The goals I have for my children are so different, and it hurts me when I see parents push their kids and ride on that grade instead of celebrate the hard work they have done.
Wow.
So
And
I thought that
I
was,
really, yeah,
yeah,
it's, it's a real thing. And, you know, one of my kids is a neurodivergent learner. He
Mhm.
has ADHD and like a learning disability, which he is doing like extremely well right now. But, you know, it was tough in the beginning. And me accepting that was like the biggest thing, because then I was able to, you know, accept my child for who they were and really sit back and say, okay, what do I need to do? You know, where I've in the education system, I see a lot of parents that are not even seeing it, or they don't want to admit or, you know, accept that their children have these like learning needs.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
you know, it's been about 3 years since I did my own private testing with him, because
Mhm.
I noticed a significant change in his reading. And, you know, some parents would maybe sit there and blame the teacher or say, like, what's wrong with my kid? Like, he's not paying attention. But you have to step back and be like, okay, like, what can I do as a parent? Because the school system, there's some holes in with regards to assessing children. Unfortunately, it
Mhm.
takes years.
Yeah.
So if I waited for the school system to give him this diagnosis, he would have got diagnosed in grade 8 as opposed to grade 4,
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
because there's waiting lists, there's meetings, then there's meetings upon meetings, and then you have to get formally diagnosed, you know, outside of the school from a like psychologist, and then you got to bring that diagnosis into the school in order for them to get an IEP.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I went privately, did the testing myself, which, you know, very emotional process, because you're dealing with your own things inside, but you're kind of pushing it, and like you just got to do what you got to do to help your kid. And like I actually got in pretty quickly. It was all covered by insurance. Like I think it
Oh,
cost $3,000 and it was covered completely by insurance,
that's
which is
great.
like, I share this with a lot of people because people don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think, like, personally, that's part of an issue too, is like the education to the parent education on this kind of stuff. They need
Mhm.
some guidance, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like getting him that diagnosis was life changing. And it changed the
Mhm.
complete trajectory of his life, because it gave him the opportunity to get an IEP
Mhm.
formulated, to
Mhm.
get access to extra help when he needs it, and it's a legal document. So
Nice.
the teachers have to follow it, and I'm on top of it when
Mhm.
it's not being followed, and I will ask him. And, you know, unfortunately, when the older they get, you have to advocate a little bit more, but that is what gives them the accommodations that they need.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
you know, looking back at what we were talking about, me putting my stuff aside,
Yeah.
looking at my child and their struggles, and just what do they need, what kind of learner are they,
Yeah.
because he is creative
Mhm.
and he's a leader, and he's like, you know, Andrea, like
Mhm.
he's so emotionally in tune. And
Yeah.
I tell him, I'm like, you're going to be the richest one. He's the most successful one, only because like he has like all of these natural skills, charisma, personality. I'm not saying my other children don't. I'm saying they all have their strengths, you know? So how do I um like foster these strengths? He was having struggle reading. If I would have put him in something like Kumon for someone with ADHD, he would have went like this,
Yeah. No
Mhm.
because
kidding.
that is not how he can learn. He
Mhm.
Yeah.
cannot focus and rote learn for hours and repetition. So
Yeah.
he's in dance, and he's got a creative outlet. He plays soccer, you know,
Mhm.
he loves to draw. Like he gets the help that he needs at school. I I really push the emotional intelligence learning for him, so that he can learn to self-regulate himself when he gets
Yeah.
stressed out about school.
That's
So
amazing.
parents have like a huge role in this too,
Of
obviously.
course. Yeah.
Um, And I think just sometimes there's a little bit of holes within the school system, unfortunately, because there's like a fine line between kids that have just learning needs and like a diagnosed thing. But at the end of the day, if your class in front of you, diagnosed or not, are not focusing or focus better hands on, then you as an educator have to foster that.
Yeah. I
So do
mean,
you
I
think a lot?
personally think,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
sorry, but I personally think like all children right now have an attention problem. Like,
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
call it what it is. The
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
fact that most of them have grown up in front of a screen, that they could skip to the next thing when they want, is creating attention fragmentation in our children. We have it as
Mm-hmm.
adults. So
Yeah.
imagine our children that are still developing their brains. So I think in general, because of this, and this isn't going away,
Mm-hmm.
because now we could educate parents, we could tell them how important it is not to give, devices to children at a young age. We could show them the research, but at the end of the day, the devices are there and parents are busy. Parents like use it to help them. Some are working multiple jobs, some are, working from home, and they need, it helps. I know it helps. So because of this like digital culture that we're all in, the education system has to start reflecting those needs. And I'm not saying, it's play based for everybody all the time and, there's no attention at all. But I think it needs to be included in the conversation that these children are having a harder and harder time. Maybe it's not allowing phones in the classroom in high school. Like, I know that in Ontario, they've taken it out, but I can't tell you there is not one classroom, Shar, right, that we
Yes.
have been into in this school year when this rule has been put in place where there are no phones. Every kid has their phone out, and we have to constantly remind them to put it away, to get it off their desk. And it's almost like we're asking them to do something they've never heard of. And it's like, hello, this is a rule. So why aren't schools making it a rule that every single classroom you walk in, your phone goes in a box? You get it when you leave.
Yeah.
I don't know why this isn't a thing. Again, because it helps teachers, right? Because it gives teacher, okay, now it's, self, like, do your work, it's work period. So work period means you take out your phone? Like, there shouldn't be, no, work period is you're on your laptop, you have your paper pen, and you're doing work. You don't need a phone for work
Right.
period.
Yeah.
But this is what I hear from my daughter is, oh, work period, they let us use their phone. But and I know, because when I have these conversations with teachers, it's the same thing with parents. It's easier. We'd rather not argue with them. They all have an excuse why they need to be on their phone. This and that. Oh, my mom needs to get a hold of me. No,
Really? In the
my
middle of
mom
class?
needs to
And
get a
I
hold.
see it from a teacher perspective too, because when I was in the elementary school system, I would always question like the intermediate teachers, and I'd be like, make me understand, like how come it's so difficult? Like, can you not, like I was saying, asking the same questions like you were just asking, Andrea, like, why can't we just lock them away? And they're like, this is I don't want to be liable for their phones. One response was, I don't want to be responsible for their phones. And some parents have told the teachers that they want the students to have the phone on them at all times.
That is
So
brutal.
that's frustrating
Yeah.
Yeah,
because you're setting your students up for failure by not even taking the distraction away from them.
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
They
But
don't
but
need it.
now with the change in rule, I don't think parents can even say that unless there's like a really big reason.
This was pre cell phone policy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I
But now
also think
they,
another issue is after COVID. So I taught online during COVID. We taught Google Classroom. Everything was digital, and it was great because it was what you needed to do at that time. We like me and my teaching partner, we made it as interactive as possible. I was sitting here, we were baking, like we would bake things on the screen. Like we tried to make it as interactive as possible.
Mhm.
But what I've noticed now that COVID is over is people are still using the Google Classroom, which is a good resource for parents. Like I like going on and seeing, pictures and homework updates and stuff like that. But in the classroom, do we need to be doing slides and videos and it be so digital based all the time, like down to the kindergarten level?
Yeah.
Because math videos, learned or worked when we were online.
Yeah.
But now that you're back in the classroom, I'm not saying you can't put a fun song on. Like, I get it. But now I feel like it's almost become like a norm that some people are not coming out of it anymore.
Yeah.
And
So do
that's
you
another technology issue, is like children learning by like videos.
Oh, okay, that's what I want to ask you. So it's like the teacher's not teaching, they're putting videos on to teach the lesson, like that
It's
kind of thing?
supplementary
A
sometimes,
supplement, okay.
but I'm saying that's like just more, you're watching YouTube.
Mm.
And it can be a fun thing to wrap up a unit. Like I'm not saying it can't be useful, but when you're teaching a unit, like I feel like it needs to be hands-on. Hands-on is getting lost because of the technology in the classroom. That's like what I believe. In not every classroom, but as a whole, that's what I've noticed.
Yeah, I agree. I think I have to agree with that, especially in the elementary level of things where like, I mean, now I know there's no more chalkboards, but it's like, it was chalkboard and writing and you went up there and you wrote stuff down and
Yeah,
it
like
was,
I know it's going to be digital and your lesson's going to be up there, but I feel like there also has to be more hands-on learning, especially for this generation
yeah.
that doesn't do anything with their hands anymore.
Yeah.
It's so
You
true.
know,
Slides, tap, tap,
right?
swipe, swipe.
And I know a lot of it is thinking outside the box, and it does require a lot more effort, but it's possible. And I can say it's possible, like not speaking from someone that's never experienced it, from what me and my coworker did during COVID, like we kept hands-on online. We made them bags. They picked up bags. They had popsicle sticks and they
Wow.
were doing tally marks and they were using counters to do math. Like it's possible
Yeah.
when we were virtual. So
Yeah.
I think that's part of the whole distraction too, is like we need less electronic YouTube teaching in the classroom.
Yeah, that's a huge thing and a very, very good solution and thing to bring up because I wouldn't have even thought of that, but it's true. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
how are
And
we going to take away the device when that's what is being used
so
as
it's
well?
constant.
Well,
So
even like my daughter plays a lot of those like Kahoot
yes.
and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And it's digital based. Like you need to use your phone to log in to play the game. But I think you can do it on your laptop too. But again, they say, okay, take out your phone and do and play the Kahoot, right? Where how many of them are not even doing it? And they're just texting their friends.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
I
talking
think
about high school here.
we're in the digital age, guys. Listen, like AI is huge.
Yeah.
It's gonna be infiltrating our classrooms. But I think like just summarizing what we're talking about, it has to be supplementary. Like that's a thing. Like we uh like AI is like, listen, I'm not gonna lie, right? I've been using Chat GPT for a lot of stuff. However, I'm using it for templates and ideas, but I still have to be in whatever I'm creating, right? Like, so the supplement, it's great as a supplementary, but it can't be what takes over everything for us. So I think it's about finding that healthy balance in the classrooms. And I think we even talked about this at one point in time. Andrew, do you remember we were at a school and a teacher was telling us about how she used the red, the orange, and the green light
Yeah.
system?
Yeah.
And the red light was you can't use AI at all. The orange was you could use both, like supplement it and then also have your own creative ideas. And then green was like go for it and play around with AI, with ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever it is that they're, whatever platform they were using, and understand how to use it, or how, what kind of information it can provide you according to the kind of questions you're asking, the details that you're asking for. So again, we're moving into that space, but we don't want it to take over our brains,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
right?
And when I think of, and again, my brain always goes to elementary school because that's my area.
Mhm.
Like high
Yeah,
school and that age is very new to me.
right.
But with regards to elementary school, and we've been talking about, the grades and about adapting to children's learning. I
Mhm.
feel like because a lot of the kids are have trouble focusing, we have to look at the students in front of us and bring in more exciting hands-on learning for them.
Well, and
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Like, I think elementary school, when they're like, there's still so much brain development going on. I think less of that is really important. And again, like, one of the things that we, all three of us, learned when we were talking to that amazing teacher last week was what he was saying in high school, grades have improved because of the social emotional learning. And so if we build that as a very big foundational part of education in the elementary school
Mm-hmm.
system, and bring it forth somehow into these high school courses, kids' grades will naturally improve,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
remember, they're no longer just an island and competing. They're now working as a team and creating these amazing group dynamics, and they're open to learning and being accountable and responsible for their learning with the experiences and the people that are around them. Like, so that I think is a very big part of all of this.
100%. 100%. It almost gives them more of a like ability to understand why they're doing things
Hmm.
and why they want to do it versus just do it because you have to.
Hmm.
Like, so when you bring in that social and emotional aspect to learning, it gives them the buy-in almost.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying for everyone, but I think for a lot.
Yeah.
And listen, there's in Ontario, they've shifted the math curriculum, and apparently in the grade 9 curriculum, and I'd love to do more research on this to find out, but the grade 9 math curriculum includes social and emotional learning. Now, I don't know what that is,
Yeah.
and even the teacher that told us about this said they don't even know how many teachers are actually.
Yeah. It's not monitored.
It's because you don't, because this is the other thing, is you can put all the curriculum stuff and you can add all this stuff, but then there's a lot of teachers that are still continuing to do their own thing. Yeah, they still have to reach benchmarks of certain things, I'm sure, but they're used to their lessons plans, they're used to their way. And like parents, if they're not socially and emotionally aware, or feel comfortable with that material, they're not going to teach it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think that's the biggest barrier too,
Yeah.
is, from what I've experienced with, like, meeting so many different teachers, different types of teachers along the way, you can see who, is passionate about it in their own life because they were the ones bringing it in the classroom.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's almost like it makes sense because how are they going to implement something they don't believe in?
Hmm.
Totally.
Right. But as a parent, firsthand, I've seen when my child's brain is calm, he's like functioning at 100%.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
And
His,
the environment as well, right?
yeah.
Like when the teacher comes in with a good mindset and brings that energy into the classroom. And listen, I know we all do the same thing as we teach our kids that, you're in charge of yourself and no one else. And, you go in with your best mindset. But it's also true that, it's hard to do that when you have like an erratic teacher. and bringing in that high stress energy. I mean, the kids can do as much as they can to regulate themselves, but when that environment is dysregulated, that's really tough,
Yeah,
right? So
environment is always going to be number one.
yeah,
And, always what we did, if something wasn't working, you go down to strip it down to the basics. Let's
yeah,
look at our environment. Is there enough calming spaces in the room?
yeah,
Is it too cluttered? Like, let's take this down. Because, even just as adults, if our environment is cluttered, our brain is cluttered. Let's be real.
no,
If a classroom is cluttered and a classroom is not set up with those intentions, that affects the environment too,
hmm,
along with the teachers, implementing these social emotional learning into the curriculum.
And
yeah,
remember, a lot of times our kids don't have control of that, right? And so I
No.
think also setting our kids up to understand what can you control in that setting. It's not your teacher, it's not your friends. What can you control? Okay, I can control myself. And I know, like with my kids, sometimes they'd come home, the first day of school, I got this teacher, or so and so is in my class, or so and so is not in my class. And then the way that I'd always set them up is, okay, is it possible that you're in this environment because there's something that you could potentially learn, right? And
mhm,
so then I just like kind of opened that space for learning. And then, I mean, don't get me wrong, if something was really off in the classroom, or there was some really awful dynamic, I mean, I obviously stepped in as a parent, um, but I wasn't one of those parents that was like, okay, I'm going to get you into so and so's class. I kind of let the chips fall where they may. and
And
yeah,
and then I said, okay, what can you control, what can't you control? And I think, again, at the end of the day, as parents, we have to be engaged and involved, but also we have to be engaged and involved with the teacher. Like, we need to kind of put teachers on notice, and teachers need to put parents on notice. Like, it's a group effort. Like, it takes a village, right? We always say it takes a village. So we're a part of the village, whether you're a teacher, you're an educator, whether you're, a support worker in a classroom or whatever. But we all have to work as a team to really help our kids excel and like do
mhm,
well and really help feed their individuality.
I agree. And if it's more social and emotional learning that we're looking for as parents, as teachers, then we need to ask for it. We need to go to the people that we need to, the powers that be, whatever it is, and we need to ask for this. Like, especially in the public system, like we're paying for this. This is our tax paying money, and if we want to see more of this implemented, then we need to be asking for it and making those changes where needed. And or maybe it is already happening and we don't see it, but then show me where it's happening.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
make me understand where this is being implemented. And it is tough. Like, it's we know that a few years ago, our education minister announced a mandate for mental health
Yeah.
education in all schools.
Mhm.
So when we ask certain teachers and schools about this, you ask them, so what are you doing about this? Oh, I don't know. It's coming from here. It's coming from there. We have these mental health ambassadors and we run like one workshop, like a year. Like it's all like, it's
checking
sort of like,
boxes.
yeah, like they're told, okay, we're giving you all this money to do mental health, but there's not like a clear process. There's not a clear, and I understand, different regions, and Ontario's really big, so different areas of the province are going to have different implementations, but like, how are you following up with this? How are you making sure that these things are implemented, and is there an assessment of it? Like, how is it working? Like, is it helping? If it's not, how can we improve it? And is there something better we can try? And so,
I
yeah,
think
like,
it also comes down to the principles, right? The
yeah,
prince Like, I've had different principals, and when the principal is strong and passionate about mental health and
yeah,
mental well-being of the students, It's evident every single day in various ways,
Yeah.
whether it's signage, whether it's announcements, whether it's activities, brain breaks, exercise break, music breaks over the PA, like those little things. That all comes down to just like, a teacher's or educator's view about that into their classroom, their belief system. It even comes down to the principals. No matter what's being told, they are the leaders of the school.
Sure.
And it's
Yeah.
very evident when they are passionate about mental health.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I agree.
And I mean, I just want to mention one other thing that someone had said to me over my Instagram, and then we can kind of leave it at this. But so this is a teacher. She's actually a teacher from the U.S. She did grow up in Canada, but she moved to the U.S. and is teaching high school there now. And what she was saying is that the piece on kids being kind versus smart, which is not really what I was saying, but anyway, I get what she's simplifying it, is spot on from a parent perspective. From a teacher perspective, it's complicated. If you're in a district where social emotional learning or empathy are woke buzzwords and not like basic human decency, then it becomes hard to tackle in the school. Though that should be your job as a parent. I agree that there's way too much grind culture around success, but look at how much our governments, not schools themselves, are focused on assessing students. Of course, they learn that grades and being smart is paramount because they have the weight of school rankings on their shoulders.
Oh yeah, that's
So
true.
again, like I know it's probably a little different in the States in terms of school rankings, but it happens here too. We have EQAO, right? And in grade 3, 6, and 9. And then also in grade 10, they do the English part of it. Grade 9, they do math. Grade 10, they do the reading and writing part of it. And what is this? So what is this doing? It's showing, okay, where are kids? Are they meeting their benchmarks? Um, it also shows how well a school is doing, how well a teacher's like. I remember when my kids used to have EQAO, they used to be like, more my daughter would get so anxious about it. I'm like, why are you freaking out for? Like, this is basically to show, are you being taught properly?
And what you know, that's it.
And what you know. That's it. Now in grade 10, she did need to complete it. Oh, sorry. I think it was the math that's grade 10 and grade 9 is English. I don't know. I might be messing it up, but there is they need to give them a little bit of a mark for it because what they found was students weren't even showing up for the test if it didn't hold a little bit of value towards the grades.
Oh.
But she was also stressing out about that. And she's like, Mom, whatever, if what if I get, 1% instead of 5%? Because I think it was like 5% or something they got. And I was like, but if you're being taught properly and you understand the information, then it's not like they're giving you any like surprise, questions. So, but again, like, what is the purpose of this? Is it working? Because I know that obviously it wasn't around when we were younger. It came in, I can't even remember how long ago, but like, what is the purpose of this? Because they spend a whole lot of money on this EQAO, from creating the tests to marking the tests to assessing the tests. Like, we're putting a crap load of money into this, and what is it doing?
It's rankings. That's the way I see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's
But
just
but so what? What does rankings mean? Like I'm like, I'd love to have a conversation with someone who knows about this. If anyone's listening and knows someone who could talk to us about this, about why we are having these EQAO tests any longer, or what is the outcome? What was the goal, and what have we seen? Has it helped?
and if the scores are low, what's being done after that?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Or is
Exactly.
it just validating what we already know? Because obviously it's going to show a map, right? And be like, okay, this area of the province is low, this area is high. But is it just reaffirming what we already knew?
Kind
that
of.
maybe, areas with low income families have lower test scores. Like, I don't know. I'm generalizing, but like, is it just validating what we know? And then what are we doing in those areas? Like, do we still need to be doing this? Or do we now have enough research and knowledge to let it go and just work on the areas that need the help and maybe put more money and focus into other things?
Well, it puts pressure on the students, like you said, but it also puts a lot of pressure on the teachers
100%.
Well,
because
I
they're going
think
to
that's what
feel
it was.
responsible for these grades.
Right. And I think that was my impression of that test, is that are the teachers doing their job?
Yeah,
Right?
that's
Like,
what they
are
wanted
they, like, are
to know.
they basically teaching what needs to be taught for the kids to like do well on these tests or pass these tests or whatever it is? I mean,
But
again, I could be wrong. And listen, guys, I'm sure there's 101 different perspectives on everything that we've even spoken about today. And I think it would be nice to have someone on here that maybe has a different perspective, something that we might not be seeing, right?
yeah,
Um, because it is a really important topic on what's being taught, what our kids are being graded on, how it's showing up in their life. Does it equal success? Like all of those things. Like, we're seeing it from one perspective, but I'd be so curious to see,
I think I know
learn.
someone.
Huh? You know
you
someone?
know someone?
I know
Okay,
someone.
good.
Awesome. Bring them on.
I know. Well, listen, on that note, I think, we've really tackled this topic well from both episodes. And I mean, I'm sure we can go on and on and on. But I think we've really talked about a good variety of where the challenges are, where the solutions might lie. I mean, I think, as we always say in the Empowerment Project, it starts with us. It
Mhm.
starts with us as parents, as people. It's like, when all else fails, what can I do myself
Mhm.
to improve my life, to improve my children's experience, to, whatever. So I think at the end of the day, that's what we have to do. Right. But also push and ask questions and get the information from those who know, and see if we can create movement as much as possible. So,
Yeah, I agree.
any final words, ladies?
Yeah, I think it's important for parents to really be involved in, I'm not saying hovering over schoolwork because that's a full-time job. And I don't think that's really going to benefit your child, but really being in talks with and communicating with the teachers.
Mm.
And that's also what's going to help teach you about your child. Because if you're just looking at marks and grades and rankings, and then a teacher's telling you, well, you know what? They're like amazing at art and at
Mhm.
problem solving and at this and at that. And then you're also going to learn more about your child and about their strengths. So I think that school is a great way to learn more about your child so you can help your child as well.
Mhm.
And I think, don't stop doing that when they get to high school.
No,
Yeah.
it's ongoing for sure.
Because I think a lot of parents do. They stop going to the interviews. They figure, oh, my kid's got it. They don't know. These teachers need to see that you're involved and that you give a crap, and
Yeah.
you need to
Agreed.
meet that. Like, it literally takes like half an hour out of your day, and you go and you meet all four of their teachers. Show your face. Like, don't give up at the end. Like, if
Mhm.
anything, put more focus,
Mhm.
because that's where the high stress really comes into play. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Agreed.
Amazing. Well, thank you, ladies, for this great discussion. Thank you all for listening. We will be back next week for another great episode. We hope you all have an amazing day. Bye for now.